So I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. Her name is Amina Zamani, and she's a media consultant, and she's from San Francisco. She's also a life coach and a recent San Francisco TED Talk speaker. And she's well trained in neuro-linguistic programming, coaching, and hypnosis. She listens and sees people on a different level than most others do. Amina works with highly functioning people who are already awake to help them see the patterns in their lives that are not working. Her talk title is Discover the New You by Playing to Your Strengths. And before I introduce her, I've known her for several years, and what I love most about her is her energy and her transparency of displaying a lot of love. And so please welcome to Sac SoulTalks, Amina Zamani.
What comes up for you when you see me wearing this veil, in this costume? Do you feel a little separate from me? Are you wondering what's behind this veil? Do you feel sorry for me? What judgments come up for you? What labels come up? What happens when I take it off? What judgments and labels come up now when you see me wearing this dress? Do you relate spirituality to a woman that looks like this? Do you feel a little more comfortable with me as I remove my veil? Are you a little more interested in learning about me? Afghanistan, a country where the life expectancy of a woman is 44 years old, where in 1999 the literacy rate was 16%, where women have gotten acid thrown on their faces because they wanted an education, where women are forced to wear a veil. That's where I'm from. Before 9/11, nobody knew where Afghanistan was. So when I moved to the United States and I tell people I'm from Afghanistan, people would say, where? That in the Middle East somewhere? It's actually not. I'm not Middle Eastern. I'm Southeast Asian, right? That's where Afghanistan is. And after 9/11, it was a completely different story. It went from, huh? Where? To, oh. That's where you're from. Plus a very long pause. Right, one of the most controversial countries in the world. But kas nago kas kujasti, my mom would say. Translation: don't tell anybody where you're from. She was asking me to put on a veil for what? For protection. She wanted me to be safe. She wanted me to hide the fact that I was from this country. But I had put on a veil on myself way before 9/11. When I was 6 years old, I always knew when it was dinner time because the women would scurry around the kitchen. I was born in Pakistan and I lived in Pakistan for 6 years, 7 years. And so I could always tell that we had guests because dinner time would be normal. The women would scurry around, but when we had guests, everybody would be frantic and they'd be cooking from morning to night and they would all wear their veils. And guess what? These women spent so much time preparing the dinner, but who ate first? The men ate first, and the women were forced to wear their veils. There was one female that could eat with the men, and that female was me. I was 6 years old, right? My age and my relationship with my father defined those rules, defied them, right? I was just a little kid. Of course I got to eat with the men. It was not a problem. So on one hand, at 6 years old, being in a huge house with a big table of men being served by women, I thought I was the cat's meow. I thought, wow, what else is possible? I've made it. I'm at the big table with the big boys having the dinner and people are serving me. I'm all powerful. What else can't I do? And so this experience at 6 years old had a profound impact on me, as we know that our experiences have these great impacts on us. So I professionally would walk into a room and sit next to a CEO and wouldn't even know, right? I belonged at the table. That was not an issue. And it would give me empowering beliefs for the rest of my life. And so it helped me personally and professionally. I could walk in somewhere and be cool, right? Because I belonged at the table. And so it made me look good, or it gave me the perception that it's okay, I look good, it's fine. But on the other hand, it actually had some pretty profound negative effects on me as well. Because I looked around the table and I saw the men eating and drinking, and I wasn't one. So at which point would I stop having the privilege of being able to eat with them? At which point would I then have to be the person that wears the veil and have to go to the kitchen? And this created a profound conflict for me. And I also grew very angry. And I thought, if this is what being a woman means, I want nothing to do with it. And I just said, forget it. I don't want to be a woman. I don't want to be associated to this culture. Forget it. So when I moved to the United States in 1999, I had a second chance, right? I moved here and we moved to Davis, and I made sure that I didn't have an accent, right? The language, like my parents had an accent. And I just thought, if I can speak like the American people and if I can look like them, then great. I don't ever have to deal with the fact that I want to disassociate from my culture and I want nothing to do with it. I'd put on a veil. And what happened is I felt sorry for the young kids and women that would come to this country and wear a veil. And I thought, I'm different. Look. I look different. I'm not wearing the veil. I can speak like you. So it must be that I'm okay. I was out, playing with my friends, my Caucasian friends. We played volleyball and hung out and were obsessed with boys, and I thought I'd made it. I'm good. And all the while, I had this sense of self-hatred brewing. Because how can you really like yourself? How can you really accept love from other people if you actually don't want to be who you are? And it wasn't until I studied abroad in college, and I went to school in this city, in this town, so it's really special to be here. But I went here and I enjoyed it, and I was just partying, and again had my veil on figuratively, right? Never addressed the fact that my parents came from this war-torn country. You know, there's something that happens inside of us human beings. It's like muscle memory pain that we have. Kids from the Holocaust have it. People from Afghanistan have it, right? It's these mirror neurons that are shut down when your parents are frantic and they've been through trauma of war. Nothing has to be discussed for you to have this pain inside of you, to have this rejection and anger inside of you. So ignoring it certainly doesn't do anything. And so I had fooled what I thought was everybody. And it wasn't until I went abroad, like I said. I studied abroad on a cruise ship on this program called Semester at Sea. And there I was with people from India, Africa, Brazil, Cuba. And guess what? They were all young and they loved their culture. And in fact, they preferred their culture. Can you imagine somebody that, I spoke 4 languages. English is my 4th language, and I only spoke English with my friends, of course with my peers. I was ashamed of who I was. I wanted nothing to do with it. And yet here I am, where people, in some ways, were like, oh, English, no, we want to speak Spanish. We want to speak our language. We love this. And I had a tipping point. I had a moment where I thought, oh my God, wow, it's cool to be who you are, right? And so I discovered I had been wearing a veil all along. And the veil that I was wearing was this figurative veil. And if I think about a veil as a metaphor, right? What's worse, the woman wearing the veil or my judgment of her? Think about that. She might be okay with it, but what's worse? And so for me, my head blew open and I thought, I can't do this anymore. I have to accept who I am. And I took off my veil. I came back and I embraced my culture, and I started making a documentary about Afghanistan, and I interviewed a bunch of people from there. And what I found actually is that some of the most liberated people I've ever met are from Afghanistan. Some of the most kindest, generous people I've ever met are from Afghanistan. My mom wore miniskirts, studied abroad, and worked while my dad went to medical school. Because of the shame that I had of wanting to be like everybody else, I could never embrace who I was. Right? So if we think about this veil as a metaphor, there's lots of veils that we wear in society. Each one of us has some veil, right? Even out there, there's the veil of elitism. Right? Do I have the latest iPhone, especially in San Francisco? Did I go to the right school, or do I have the latest technology? Or how many times have you guys walked into a party and somebody asks you, what's your name? What do you do? As if what I do defines who I am. So if we think about this, I encourage all of you, no, I implore all of you, to consider what your veil might be and what would happen if you took it off. What would open up for you? For me, a lot of things opened up. I wrote a book. I'm sorry, I wrote a chapter in a book. Forgive me. I'd love to say I wrote a book. I wrote a chapter in a book about being Afghani, right? I even made more money because not because I worked harder and faster and quicker, because I embraced myself and I opened up to other possibilities. And the way that I did it is I looked within myself and I got support for the areas that I felt like I was struggling in. It's not like one can make a transformation through one epiphany. When I graduated college, I was so clueless. I'd come back from semester at sea, I studied abroad again, and then I just had a quarter-life crisis. What do I want to do? So I took a lot of coaching training. I got a lot of support, and I discovered, wow. So I had put on this veil of wanting to be different. But with this veil, I never explored what my strengths were. I never questioned, what is it that I really want to do? What is the impact that I want to make? I was too busy trying to look good for you. And this disease of looking good robs us of us ever recognizing our strengths and going for it. How many of you have had a passion that you wanted to follow? But nah, it's not realistic. When did you decide to put on your veil? And in this breakout session that we have, I invite you to question, are you willing to take it off? You may put it back on tomorrow, but are you willing to take it off today? Because you're worth it. Because why not? And what kind of support do you need to continue keeping your veil off? It's not enough that you take it off once. So I leave you with this. What is your veil? And what would happen if you took it off? We know magic happens outside of our comfort zone. Are we willing to let magic happen? I'm betting on you guys that a lot of magic can happen if we just choose our strengths, take off our veil. Thank you.
I'm sure everyone's got a lot of questions. Anybody?
Questions or comments or praises? Who's going to start? Speak right in.
Hi, Amina. Thank you. How do you keep your balance when you take off your veil?
Oh, thank you. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Well, I've heard some people this morning when you take off your veil and they have an enormous amount of courage because we get caught up in what other people expect of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that through my life, I've taken off my veil a few times, but I think I'm getting ready to do it again, and it's very frightening because it's like you have no pointers or no markers around you. It's like, oh my gosh. And so that's, to me, I think we're in spiritual boot camp. Absolutely, I'm clear I'm in spiritual boot camp. And so when something new comes up, renewing the new sounds wonderful when I talk about it, but the fact that I might really put my heart and soul on the line and do it, that's why I'm saying, how do you keep your balance, or how do you keep your truth?
You know, this is going to sound really counterproductive, but you don't. Right? Some people talk about like this thing regarding deservability. I want to deserve, and I feel deserving, and I don't feel deserving. What if everybody just felt literally undeserving of things? What if we're all conditioned to feel undeserving of things, but we choose grace? Grace is that which you don't deserve, right? Isn't that the definition, the spiritual? So just allow grace. You don't have to work and keep a balance. It's about the intention of, I choose to remove my veil. And the act, in my experience, the act of choosing to decide you're going to take this veil off, you're 70% there.
We have a question from Ronnie or a comment?
Well, whose idea was the veil in the first place?
I don't know what you mean.
Why did the women of Afghanistan and Pakistan believe they had to wear a veil?
I think it came from a religious background where it was a beautiful thing, where the men covered their heads, the women covered their heads in praise of being holy and clean. Like the Sikh tradition, they wear turbans, and I think it got exploited. By the way, everyone, I'd like for you to take your right hand before she speaks and wave to this woman, because this is my sister. Everybody say hi, Riha. And she is somebody that's really helped me keep my veil off. So, you know, how do you keep your balance? You have people like her in your life.
Thank you, Amina. Wow.
Just stand up, please.
I know this woman, and I feel like I was touched by her story because it was from a different perspective. And I just want to ask, like, as an audience member, how did you find your strengths? How did you reinforce them?
That's a really good question. You know, I think there's this thing that comes along with looking good where you don't have to find your strengths. That's the thing, is like you get the approval, you feel good, everything's fine. You're the status quo. For me, I believed from a young age that, oh, I'm ugly. I'm not the pretty one. Somebody else is the pretty one. Somebody else is the smart one. I felt like I had to overcompensate for something. And so in that, when I let go of the desire to overcompensate, my strengths naturally came. I love speaking from people, to people, in front of people. At first, it was because I wanted to look good and make an impact and have you see me in a certain way. I wanted to be a broadcaster. Now it's coming from a place of service. And you asked me, are you nervous? And I said, not really, because it's not about me. It's like not about me. Like me being here is not about me. And I think that's the difference, is your strengths, I think we develop them sometimes as a compensation, right? Like we learn in Landmark, we have our strong suits in all the ways we can look good. The strong suits don't go away, but it's the intention that we hold behind it. I think that's the difference. Is we all know what our strengths are, but what's our motivation behind them? And I think if the motivation can be shifted to a spiritual perspective, in my opinion, there's no problem. You have no choice but to go. It's in my opinion, it's our moral integrity. We have no choice but to follow our strengths, because if we really want to create a world in which people want to belong to, what the hell is the point? You have no choice. You must follow your strengths, because following your strengths then leads to joy in your life, and you emanate joy, and it's all about heart and love. You have no choice. You must.
Wow. Anyone else? That's a pretty big wow. I'm already like speechless myself. Here's Brenda.
Hi, Amina.
Hi.
You know, also being a little different since I'm Asian in the United States, I used to feel like I didn't want to be different. And I embrace my difference now. But in a different realm, in my spiritual community, it's very easy because we can be our real selves, because we all kind of think the same way. So we can be our real selves. But sometimes out in other places, like let's just say my neighborhood, where the people aren't spiritual, and they kind of lump spirituality into one thing, and they think, oh, if you talk about something, you'll be fanatical or something. So there, I don't always feel like I can be my real self.
So you're asking me, how do you keep that balance?
Yeah.
You know, that's a good question, and that's just another opportunity. Like, I took a lot of training in neuro-linguistic programming, a lot of training in coaching, and it's having the courage to show up authentically despite what our surroundings show. So in all the clients that I work with, right, some of them come to me because they say, you know, I've been in business, I just want to start my own business. And then what we really come to is, wow, I'm afraid to follow my dreams. I don't want to start a business, I want to sing. I mean, really, right? Like, they say that, or people come to me and they say, I have this incredible relationship, or I wanted this incredible relationship. And what we discover is that actually they want to travel, right? Or they have all this trauma that they've experienced in their life, and they want to be free from the trauma so they could be authentic. So the work that I do with people using NLP is that we help them get to your authentic self. You break down barriers. So it's not like we have one realization and we're done. It's getting support. It's working with a coach. It's working with therapists. It's coming to lectures like these, right? In the face of confrontation or opposition, it's easier to hide. But the courage and authenticity comes from speaking in such a way that it doesn't matter. It's between me and me anyway.
Thank you so much, Amina.